Hello everyone, good morning and welcome back to Sports Today. We bring you this video segment every single morning to help you catch up with things that have been taking place in the world of sport that whilst you were catching up on some all-important rest, because let's face it, whilst you and I and the whole world really need sleep, the world of sport doesn't really sleep. There's always something or the other going on, and it can be a little tough to keep a track of every little thing that is taking place. But worry not, that's what we're here for. And of course, one of the pervading stories that everyone has been talking about has been Pakistan's near miss of a win against Ireland. I call it a near miss because, well, it was a game that, truth be told, Ireland could just as easily have won and ensured that Pakistan's T20 World Cup campaign came to an embarrassing end. Thankfully, that didn't happen, but it has raised plenty of question marks over, let's say, Pakistan's future in the format, with Virender Sehwag actually going as far as saying, I don't understand what it is that they're trying to do in this particular format. What exactly do you think their future is? They seem to always make the batting conditions look tougher than they actually are, and even in what are decent batting conditions like you had at Lauderhill, Florida, they tended to make things much tougher for themselves. And it is a valid criticism when you look at it, because whilst you could understand playing a little slow on what was a tricky, often dangerous New York pitch, wasn't really the case in Lauderhill, Florida, but yet Pakistan ended up making things very difficult for themselves with their very conservative batting. And that brings us to another criticism that has often faced Babar Azam, his style of batting, one that has now come under fire from, of all people, Chris Shrikant, who you'd remember would play even test cricket with the kind of flamboyance that wouldn't be out of fashion in today's day and age. In fact, Chris Shrikant was far more scathing, let's say, of his criticism, saying that Babar should be retiring from T20 cricket because you can't be, and these are his words, tuk-tuking around all the time. That is, wow, that is a pretty brutal takedown really of Babar's style of batting, which has come under the scanner a lot, even more so on tougher pitches where sometimes you need to think a little out of the box and you need to perhaps look at, trying something different. Even what makes things even worse is that in tough conditions, sometimes it's okay to play a little conservatively, and despite that, Pakistan actually ended up failing. So plenty of question marks really over their batting, over their approach, over everything that has been going on. And naturally, there were questions then that were put to Babar Azam in the post-match press conference, with one very common one being, what exactly is your future as skipper? And Babar's answer was simple. The captaincy matters is in the PCB's hands. Essentially, he's saying, listen, I'm not going to be quitting. If the PCB wants to make me quit, go right ahead. He even refused to take any responsibility for the loss by saying, look, it's not just about one individual. We failed collectively as a unit. It's not just about the captain or the batters or the bowlers or the fielders or the selectors. It was a collective failure, which is a great way of absolving himself really of any responsibility, whilst he's not entirely wrong in stating that failure in a team sport is often down to the team. As a captain, as a leader, it does make a little bit sense to take things upon yourself and say, listen, at the leadership which I provided wasn't good enough along with everything else. And all he said was, no, it's a collective failure. It's not just one person, thereby indirectly absolving himself of any criticism. It's an interesting take really, and one that, should be told, this does require a deeper dive. We'll be doing that later on in the day, so keep your eyes peeled for that. But this isn't the only T20 World Cup related talk that there is. Of course, earlier today there was a match that pitted, Bangladesh against Nepal. Bangladesh won that particular match to seal their spot in the Super 8s, meaning that the last game of the day that would be played, or rather later on today, which was between Sri Lanka and the Netherlands, ended up being very much the deadest of dead rubbers. One, that Sri Lanka ended up winning by a pretty comprehensive margin, scoring 201 in the first innings and then bundling Netherlands out for 118. Worth noting that the Netherlands actually had an outside chance of Super 8 qualification had Bangladesh somehow lost to Nepal, but given Bangladesh ended up winning that match, as I said, deadest of dead rubbers. And let's switch focus now from the world of cricket to the world of football. And England got their European Championships campaign off to a pretty convincing, or a less than convincing start, with a 1-0 win over Serbia, which required a goal from Jude Bellingham. But after that, they were under a lot of pressure throughout, and there were multiple occasions where Serbia could and should have perhaps done better to put more pressure on England. In the end, though, a well-deserved 3 points because they managed to grind out the result. But more questions than answers really looking at this England team, because after getting one goal, they just seemed to freeze. They didn't really look to take any more initiative, especially in the second half. and there will be question marks over what should be a very good looking side on paper, once again potentially not performing up to potential. Another European Championships game that took place last night was between Denmark and Slovenia, and it was a 1-all draw which featured one really feel-good moment, and that was this man right here, Christian Eriksen, getting on the score sheet for Denmark. Why was that such a feel-good moment? Well, because it was exactly 1100 days to the day that he ended up having a cardiac arrest on the field during the Euro 2020 game, and he ended up having to be taken to the hospital. Of course, got much better after that, has been continuing his career with a heart device fitted in. But a very feel-good moment, one that unfortunately didn't last long because Slovenia actually ended up getting points of Denmark. It was a 1-all draw, which means that this group, as things stand, very much wide open with 2 games each for all of the teams still left. Switching focus to tennis now, and Sumit Nagal unfortunately could not continue his run of wins which he'd been putting together on the ATP Challenger Tour recently. He reached the finals at Perugia but only ended up losing the final in straight sets. Nevertheless, what it does is pushes his ranking up even higher. Ahead of this week, he was 77, but on the ATP Live rankings, he currently sits at 71, which in a way also sees him make history because it helps him become the highest ranked ever Indian tennis player, surpassing Leander Paes' record, which was at 73. That's an interesting, stat really, and one that shows that Nagal very much on the rise, and truth be told, seems to be doing the right thing by consistently playing in the challenger level events and accruing ranking points. Potentially now the next target for him should be making it to the top 50, because if he can do that, he'll end up getting better opponents potentially in the Grand Slams. Of course, this is also an interesting season for Nagal because it looks to be the first time where he's going to be playing through the season and not struggling with injuries. So definitely an interesting time really for Sumit Nagal in that regard. Now, one more bit of tennis news, and Great Britain have confirmed their team that they'll be sending for tennis in the Olympics, the Paris Olympics. And whilst Andy Murray was selected for both singles and doubles, there are still doubts as to whether or not he'll go ahead and compete in the singles draw in the first place. The reason for that is his dwindling form in singles, and he himself admitted that he's not sure whether he'll do it right now, and there's a better chance that he'll be taking part in the doubles where he would feel more comfortable and more confident of winning a medal. It's also interesting that Murray right now, as far as rankings goes, doesn't really qualify to make it to the Olympics, but was given a spot because he's a former Olympic as well as Grand Slam champion. There is a quota that is reserved for players of that ilk if they of course don't have a ranking in, let's say, that is good enough to be making it to Paris right now. Meanwhile, Emma Raducanu, who's one of Britain's most high profile tennis players, ended up opting out of the singles draw because she figured that she's just coming back off a long-term injury layoff and there have been multiple changing surfaces. So she said, no, I'm not going to be playing the Olympics, and it is a decision that is understandable in some ways. Her form hasn't been great, just coming off injuries, and you have to remember Olympics don't actually carry any ranking points, so don't be surprised if you see a fair few high-profile players actually opt out. But that's it from us in this edition of the Morning Wrap. Thank you guys so much for joining us. As always, if you enjoy our work, don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel, tap the bell icon, follow us on social media. We're on Instagram, X, and Facebook. Don't forget to download the Sports the Cap, and if you're already on the channel, go ahead, check out some other videos we've uploaded, and stay tuned. We have plenty more coming your way through the day. For now though, from my side, it is goodbye.